currently. So, but most of you are here, so why don't we get started? Bonjour. Jennifer Wolf, Nindishnikaz, Ishkwegi Jigunquin, Indigo Jibomag. My name is Jennifer Wolf, and I am Ojibwa and Santee, Dakota, and Ponca. And I live in Denver. And Project Mosaic, I do professional facilitation, mostly strategic planning, but sometimes facilitating meetings like this. So it is a pleasure to be here this evening. Chimagwich Bizendawiyeg, thank you for listening. I am going to hand this over to Richard Williams to start us off with a prayer. And thank you again. Thank you all again for being here to join us for this discussion on the other side of the story, the genocide of the Indigenous people of Colorado. Now, this topic may seem like a discussion of yesteryear, but these topics and issues are continuing to affect us today, as we saw from the decision yesterday on House Bill 1054. That our legislators, our general public, do not have an adequate understanding about who we are as a people and the factors that have led to us as a population of Colorado. And so I really appreciate you all being here. Kate is going to be putting a link in the chat. We would encourage you, if you are able to, contribute to our donation fund for attending this educational session. But if you aren't unable, then that's okay too. We're just happy to have you here. So first of all, I would love to have our panelists introduce themselves. So if we could have Richard Williams go first, that would be great.
Midaku api. Lakota imacha api tatanka haska na mila haska imacha api Rick Williams. Mie oglala Lakota na shaela. My name is Rick Williams. My Lakota name is Talbul. And I'm Oglala Lakota in Cheyenne, and I live in Broomfield, Colorado.
Thank you, Richard. Fred, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Good evening. My name is Fred Mosqueda. I'm the Arapaho coordinator for the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes located in Oklahoma. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for being here, Fred. Chester.
My name's Chester Whiteman. I'm the Cheyenne coordinator for Cheyenne Arapaho tribes, and my Cheyenne name is White Rock. Hohanawokama. So I'm glad to be a part of this.
Thank you. Kate, has Terry been able to join us?
Not yet, but I will keep watching
Okay.
the waiting room and see, and I'll let you know.
Great. Yeah, we have another speaker tonight, Terry Knight Sr., who is from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Historic Preservation Center. He's an officer in that position, but he is en route and has not the best internet connection right now. So he's going to try to join us as soon as he can. So with that, let's just jump right into the questions. And I'm going to ask each of our speakers to answer each of these questions. So the first one would be, from your tribe's history, could you please share a significant engagement between your tribe and the US and the Colorado militaries? Rick, could you tell us about that?
Sure. This is a very interesting kind of a situation because the Cheyennes really had nothing to do with this, and it has to go back. It goes back to the Mormon cow incident, an incident in Nebraska, where the people, some Lakotas, found this cow and took it and butchered it because they were hungry, and they military retaliated, or the military tried to get it back, and they were all massacred. Just a terrible situation. the officers were drunk and just started randomly firing on this camp, and it cost them their lives. Well, the aftermath of that was the U.S. military started attacking different camps, and eventually they attacked the Lakota camp at Ash Hollow and indiscriminately killed women and children. Right after that, they had asked the Cheyennes who were there but didn't participate for conversations about peace. And so they talked to the Lakotas, and the Lakotas all, said, we won't, we're going to follow the treaty. We're not going to cause any problems unless we're attacked. And so then they asked the Cheyennes, they said, we want you to say something. And the Cheyenne leaders said, we didn't do anything wrong. We weren't part of this. We're going to continue to do what we do. We're going to live on our land, and in fact, we want next year, we want in our annuities, we want more guns and ammunition because we don't have sufficient enough resources to hunt our buffalo. The military took that as being insolent and decided to wage a major campaign on the Cheyennes. So it began in 1856. They started garnering the support to do this, and by 1857, they had over 1,800 troops out in the fields in Colorado and Kansas searching for the Cheyennes, and they finally located a camp on Solomon Creek and indiscriminately attacked that camp for no reason at all, other than, as it was reported in Chiffon's book, the only reason that they attacked that camp and killed all those people was because the Cheyennes were being insolent.
Were there any specific government policies in place before these engagements that may have contributed to this situation?
There shouldn't have been. First of all, the policies that were in place prohibited all people from being in Colorado. Anybody who was on our reservations at that period of time were there illegally, and so even those ones who were coming through only had permission to move through, but that people kept violating that, and the federal government did nothing about it.
Thank you. Fred, I will ask you the same question. From your tribe's history, could you please share a significant engagement between your tribe and the U.S. and Colorado militaries?
I think one that comes to mind real quick that really made a difference in where the tribes were in 1864 when Chief Left-Hand was trying to work with Chief White Antelope and Chief Black Kettle, Bull Bear, and then to garner peace, they were told to go to the Fort Lyons. And so at one point, Chief Left-Hand decided to go and see, and to see the military commander, and to see if he could seek to get more rations, as he was told to do. So he gathered up about 20 young warriors and rode towards Fort Lyons. At that point, the military commander at the point considered all Indians hostile, and so when they rode into view, they were fired upon. And so the Arapahos immediately turned around and went back to the camp. And some of the warriors that were in this went to Little Raven's band. And I think this is where that the Little Raven got the mistrust of Fort Lyons and moved the majority of the Arapahos south. And of course, Chief Left-Hand continued to stay with White Antelope and Black Kettle. And I think that was a show of again, we use that word betrayal or dishonesty on the part of the military, that they couldn't be trusted to stand behind what they were telling them at that time.
Well, we can see that type of mistrust has carried on and had impacts on a lot of different factors. Oh, so I understand that Manuel Hart from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe has joined us, and he is going to join our panel. Thank you so much for being here. Would you please introduce yourself?
I don't know if I'm not aware of being on the panel. I just heard to listen in today, but my name is Manuel Hart. I'm the tribal chairman for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, and my Ute name is Red Arrow Ga'u. So just to let everyone know, but I'm just listening for now, okay?
Okay,
And hopefully Terry will be coming on as a panelist. Thank you.
great. Thank you, Chairman Hart. If you have anything you want to chime in on, when you hear these questions that I'm asking of the other panelists and Terry's not on and you would like to share something, please, we would love to hear from you. But if you just want to listen to, that would be fine. All right, well, I will move on to Chester and ask you the same question from the Cheyenne perspective. From your tribe's history, could you please share a significant engagement between your tribe and the US and Colorado militaries?
Man, there's so many. It's hard to pick one, but there's a real simple time when they were at the Big Timbers, and Wynkoop went to meet them, and Black Kettle would not come out and meet with them because he didn't trust them. It was already tainted, the trust with the U.S. government. So they sent a troop of Indians over there, and one of the soldiers killed Lean Bear, because he was there. Their job was to go over there and negotiate for a meeting place. But when they got there, one of the trigger happy soldiers shot Lean Bear, and they eventually met. And that's when they went to Denver to try to negotiate peace with Evans and Shevington, I guess. But Wynkoop was a major player in trying to work with the Indians to come to peace. But one of his troops didn't see that way, I guess. That's when they shot Lean Bear. So that's just a small one. That was just a little incident where trust was already dissolving because they didn't want to give the location of where Black Kettle's camp was, and they sent some warriors out to find out what they wanted, if they were gonna meet. But one of the trigger happy soldiers shot Lean Bear, but they eventually got together, and Black Kettle and Wynkoop and the other chiefs sat down and talked about peace, and he couldn't authorize that. So they moved. He said he would take them to somebody that could authorize that, which was Governor Evans in Denver or Fort Wise or someplace up that way. And that's when they got told to go to Fort Lyons, and the rest is history.
It's history that's continuing to impact our people.
Exactly.
Yep, especially when you're dealing with these issues of trust.
Exactly.
Another thread that I heard from all of your responses is that there was a tendency for escalation, people getting trigger happy, people responding to a cow with military force. So I will cycle back through our speakers. Rick, what were your tribe's approaches towards the settlers versus the settlers' mentality towards the tribes? All of that. I think you're on mute still, Rick.
Typically, I think that's one of the biggest misperceptions of Indian white relations in the past. And one of the things was that is clear evidence of this is if you look at the history of people crossing the plains along the trails, from the very beginning until they ended, and then we're using the railroad, there were only 360 white people killed during this period of time. And yet you would be led to believe that there were thousands and thousands. So consequently, you have to really think that, okay, well, these people were not really hostile. They were not really savages. And the other thing that really complicates this is, the first question, this military stuff was really critical. We've identified 76 incidents in Colorado where the military arbitrarily attacked Indian camps, destroyed them, and killed people. And we know that the aftermath of that is that Indian people would retaliate at the closest place they could, and that usually was the settlers. At the very same time, they were also friendly with most of the time. They were friendly. I mean, you read the detailed research of this, and most of the time there were friendly interactions. And it was only late in the game, after Evans declares war against Indians and authorizes Colorado citizens to kill Indians, that the hostilities really escalated to the point where it was no longer safe for anybody. Some of these incidents later on were horrific. I mean, you're not going to read this in books because they're oral stories, although there are sides to this. But there was arsenic being distributed among the settlers to kill Indians. That's the kind of relationship that people had in Colorado.
So I'm just going to ask you a quick follow-up question about that, Rick. You'd mentioned some of these acts were very arbitrary and, really underhanded with using arsenic and whatnot. I would like to ask you about the term genocide. And why do you think that maybe this term isn't regularly used to describe what happened to Indigenous people in Colorado?
Well, it's not used in Colorado primarily because of the concept of manifest destiny, which is a lie, of course, because we know that God would have never given the order to people to, kill and murder and take people's property. In fact, he gave them instructions just the opposite. The 10 commandments say, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property. But for some reason, the lie came across as manifest destiny gave rights of white people to kill Indians indiscriminately and take their property. So we know that, that was part of this complex effort to really create the genocide that happened. And for those of you who don't know it, the genocide on the Front Range of Colorado, from the Front Range in the mountains to the Eastern Plains, happened in 3 years. From 1861 to 1864, basically all Indians were wiped out and forced out of their homeland. That's why there's no reservations in the Front Range today.
Yeah, I think that was there's a big lack of understanding about that from most Coloradoans. Fred, I'd love to ask you the same question. What were your tribe's approaches towards the settlers versus how the settlers' mentality was towards your people?
I think the most famous incident that everybody, that's noted is when Chief Lefton found the miners in the Boulder area, and he told them, you can stay basically until the weather clears up, and then you must leave. So that basically tells you that once, if he could have, destroyed them right there, he could have ran them out right then, but instead he had pity on them because of their condition. And so he actually told them that they could stay there, you know, to survive. As you know, they didn't leave. And so I think this is one of the best noted incidents of how the Arapahos treated the settlers as they came in. And again, you know, as Rick said, as time went along and things got worse, even Little Raven, who basically said, I have never been at war with the whites, after Sand Creek said, this is too much, and basically let his young warriors go at that time. So that kind of shows you from being very, very cordial to them to having to just fight for their lives, basically, to take, you know, to make sure that, you know, we survived. And I think that's the way it was.
Yeah, that incident that you mentioned where they were given extra time till the weather improved, it just shows a basic understanding of the Indigenous people, of the humanity of the settlers, whereas it doesn't really feel like that was always reciprocated. You know, Indigenous people were able to show pity. So, and what are your thoughts about the term genocide? Why do you feel that this term is not regularly used to describe what's happened to Indigenous people in Colorado?
Well, because of the way that it was done, you know, the military didn't kill the majority of my people. The smallpox did. You know, one of the sub-tribes of the Arapaho was the Grovons, and they were almost totally wiped out by the smallpox. And you know, I don't know, I've heard where they said that they would bring it into the camps so that it would destroy them. This is, you know, genocide, because we had no immune system to fight that disease. And it just ran rampant through the camps because we always were together, because of the way our societies were, by being together. The smallpox was just devastating to our people. And I think that was one sure way that genocide was used against my people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you know, I think it's probably a big contributor to why Indigenous people throughout Colorado have such high vaccination rates for this pandemic, because we've been impacted by diseases so horribly in the past. So I would like to ask the same question to Chester. What were your tribe's approaches toward the settlers versus the settlers' mentality towards tribes?
You know, let me say a little bit more on what Fred said on left hand.
Okay.
He gave them, you know, he gave them a place to be, to take shelter and restore themselves and everything. And then when he went, when left hand went on a hunting party, those same miners and whoever they were, settlers, they raped and pillaged his village. You know, that's how do you slap the hand that feeds you? You know, that gives you, you know, shelter and food, and, you know, gives you the comforts of home, whatever home was at that time. But, you know, our folks, they didn't go out and look for war. They didn't go out there and look for a wagon train to attack. You know, that they were out there taking care of their land, hunting to sustain their families, our families. But, you know, the white people, when, like, take today, if you go on a white person's land, they try to shoot you. You know, we weren't like that. We shared. We took care of the land. We took care of the animals. You know, we didn't take more than what we needed. But when the settlers start coming through there, they were shooting everything in sight and raping and pillaging our food supply, and sometimes even our villages. You know, and then they call us savages. You know, we're still known as savages in the United States Constitution. It's still in there. You know, and I think we got labeled wrong, but you know, it is what it is. But we're gonna be here. You know, we're like the buffalo. They almost wiped us out, but we persevered. We're here again, and they have to deal with us now. We got taught through their schools, through their education, but we know how to fight with the pencil today. And the education that we were given, even though we had to give up some of our tradition, our culture, but it's coming back. Our language, everything like that. You know, we suffered a lot, not just land-wise and a way of life, but it attacked us wholeheartedly. This manifest destiny, you might say. It disrupted our way of life. It destroyed our traditional government. And you know, today we have kids that don't know their history, but we're doing something about it. We're trying to educate our own kids and our folks that are highly educated, that some of them don't know their own history, but they know classroom work and how to get around in the white man's world. So we educate them in our world, so they understand what we're talking about. And it's a difficult job, but we're making a change for our people. So we will still be our people when we're gone. So I'm thankful that I'm in this position to do something about our way of life, our language, our culture, everything that we have today. It was passed down to us, and we're the caretakers of that now. Used to, we could look behind us and see the old folks. Look behind us now and there's nobody there. We're the last line of defense today. So we're trying our best to inform and educate our people the best way that we can.
Those are good words and really important factors of resilience that you mentioned there, with education and holding on to our culture being key. Thank you for that reminder. I do want to ask you the same follow-up question about what are your thoughts about, we've got this conflict going on and we're sending our prayers to those in the Ukraine. But, the press is calling that a genocide. The politicians are calling that a genocide. Why is that term not regularly used to describe what happened to the indigenous people of Colorado, in your opinion, Chester?
In a couple of words, because we're savages. That's what we were known as, savages. We didn't know anything. We were just roaming around on the pasture, in the plains and in the hills, but they didn't know that we had our own form of government.
Mm-hmm.
Communities, that helped one another. There was nobody in each camp that went without food, that went without shelter, that went without, they all, it was like a child. That child belonged to that whole community, not just to one family. Everybody helped to raise that child. But in today's terms, the Ukrainian people are going through the same thing that we went through. People could have helped our people out back in the day, but they didn't till after the fact. The United States government, after Sand Creek, tried to penalize Shevington and Evans and all his troops and whatever, due to Sol and Kramer report. But that didn't happen. They walked away from it. Yeah, they put a pencil through their name, but what good did that do? The railroad still came through. That was the point of Sand Creek. We were in the way. And it was a peaceful village. There was no hostiles there. They attacked a peaceful village in the wee hours of the morning. If that's not genocide, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, agreed. And if that's not savagery, I don't know what is either.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I'd like to make a comment here. And one of the things that, as I've studied what's happened here in Colorado, almost immediately after Sand Creek, the direction changed to the west. And what they did to us in the east, they did to the Utes in the west. And I'd love to have Chairman Hart, if he's willing to speak a little bit about that, because it's, it was, if you look at it in detail, it's almost identical.
Chairman Hart, are you willing to share any words about that?
Yes, I could say a little bit here. Just listening to what's going on. There have been a lot of times where legislation through the United States government and the different presidents and governors have written legislation and passed it as our allotment era, the Homestead Act, the minerals found in the mountains, the gold and the silver. It impacted all of us as Indian people, as natives within the state of Colorado. We didn't look at these as treasures, as something that really would benefit in a money concept of being rich. We were already rich as tribes. These were our homelands. We valued what was around us. We valued the animals and their strengths and what they provided to put on the table for us in front of our fires. They gave us warmth in the wintertime. So this thing that has happened, it has had a revolving account where the boarding school era, which we're talking about today, it took away, they tried to assimilate us and make us white people, which we're not. We're proud native people and we have a rich tradition. And we lost all these lands in a matter of 40 to 50 years. That's what the government did because they wanted to do things to control us. And they still do today. The boarding school era took away our traditions and our language. And today we've assimilated to become white people. We dress like them. We go to their churches. We speak fluent English. And some of us have even forgot our own tribal language. But today we have that in our hands to change what has happened in the past. And we as Ute Mountain have looked toward building a school here on the reservation with our curriculum, our tribally driven curriculum of bringing back our language. So today our children are teaching their parents and their grandparents how to speak, but also to encourage them to really put out there what the history was. I've been talking to some of the legislatures in the state, and I said, we have nothing on our history about Indian people in the state of Colorado. What the legislatures need to do is put that into the curriculum so that all students across this country, across the state, can understand what we've gone through. A long time ago, when the World War II was going on, when Germany was really trying to look at how they can control people, Hitler looked at what they were doing in Indian country, United States, and that's what they used over there with these encampments and putting them in these places where they control them, beat them, mass murdering, genocide, all of that. He got that idea from what the United States was doing to the Indian people here in this country. So when I took an honor roll trip with my students over to Washington, D.C., we went to the Holocaust Museum. And I said, look at all these things right here. This is exactly what happened to us a long time ago. But nobody tells a story about it. Nobody puts it out there on the table and says, this is what happened to each one of them. Each tribe has lost their land or been moved. A lot of them got moved to Oklahoma. Some of them got moved to other places. Kickapoo was in the east side, now they're in Texas. But based on what the events were going on at that time with the different presidents and states, we were in the middle of all this stuff that was going on. So we have Calvary that always wanted to oversee us, people that were the BIA headsmen of certain tribes. They always said, you will do this or else. They always gave us that or else we'll bring the military in. And they always relied on them. That's why the United States government today, when they're looking at the history, our boarding schools were military type of schools. And some of these children never made it home. Today, some of the grandparents ask, I don't know about my great-great-grandmother or my great-great-grandfather. Some of them never made it back. So today we try to talk about that, how history has played a role in impacting each one of us. We've lost land. We've lost rights of hunting, fishing, gathering, being able to be out there. Today, we have to go through treaties and legislation to bring that back. I have water projects right now that we have inherent rights to water, but yet I have to pay for something or I have to give up something to get something through different negotiations. And it's hard, as was mentioned. Today, it's not about rifles and arrows and spears, but it's about computers and pencils and putting something down, because the white man doesn't respect what we say sometimes to each other. Tribes did that respectfully. Today, white man doesn't know what the word respect's about. So I too am in agreement with the rest of the group here talking about how we're moving forward. Yes, we've had a lot of challenges and struggles, and it's good. It's something that we need to look at in a good way, because we're going to only fight it better and stronger. We're going to bring back our language, our culture, and our traditions, but we also got to know where we came from, what happened to us, and where we're going into the future. I won't be here for a long time, but I want my kids and my grandkids to know the history of where we're going, where they came from. So with that, I thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing those really good words. And it really transitions well to my next question. And I hate to put you on the spot again, but I just was reading about the White Mesa uranium mill and its impact on the water of the Ute Mountain Ute people. Is there anything you could share about ways that allies can support your tribe?
Yes, thank you for that question. I've been fighting this one for quite a while. I've been on the council about 23 years at the end of this term coming in October. And White Mesa has been in the forefront. There's a huge company out of Canada, Energy Fuels. They came to the state of Colorado, and it's the only place in the United States where they bring uranium tailings. And a lot of these different tribes also have brought them. There's one tribe from Washington, one tribe from Oklahoma, and now the Navajo tribe is looking at cleaning up their uranium mines, and they want to bring it there. So we've been trying to fight this. We've gone to EPA in the regional level, we've gone to EPA on national level, and now we've been all told the state of Utah. And I've met with several of the governors, 3 of them, in fact, and talked to them about the impacts of the water. The community of White Mesa is a small community of about 250 people. We have uranium tailings that are being brought in. It started in the 70s and 80s, and they had 3 cells that they put in. And these 3 cells were supposed to only be there for 25 years. And the liners on them have started deteriorating. So it's starting to leak down into the aquifer. And that aquifer is where we get our water from for the community of White Mesa. And when it first was there, you could go into these houses, it would smell like boiled eggs or really bad smelling. It was kind of red rust color in the tubs and toilets and sinks, just really poor conditions. And we've been fighting and fighting. So we've been asking, how can we tie into the main system in the next town? They denied us, said, sorry, we're looking out for our people, even though that water line comes right down to the very north end of the reservation. The uranium tailing mine is about 2.5 miles north of the reservation. We put in air quality, we put in water sampling, we took these to the state of Utah. They would not adhere to what we're saying about the comparison. They got tests too, and they said, oh, we're meeting the needs, but yet they were doing their testing when it was the lowest impact. The wind wasn't blowing. The testing was where they were testing in sites on the cells where it wasn't really impacting, but barely meeting the need of the restrictions. So now we've been doing some flyovers and trying to look at the cells as they bought more land and they want to bring in more alternate feed, they call it, and bring in more tailings here to White Mesa Inc. And they want to develop it bigger. But what we've been trying to do is reach out publicly, and that's how you probably got the notification is what's going on. And there was one senator who's also looking at what Russia is doing. They're also sending uranium over here to the United States. So is Japan. And guess where they're sending it to? White Mesa. That's the very thing that's right next door to us. So we've been fighting. We applied for a USDA grant, got awarded $2 million. We put in a water treatment facility, and that's helped out some. But what we need to do is open it up to all tribes to support us, just like they did on the pipeline up in the Dakotas. Something similar to that we can do a walk together, that we can do something to bring to the attention of the state of Utah. The regulatory, they're looking at it from a money aspect. Yes, they're bringing in millions of dollars, but these 250 people are still people. They still have lives. So we're also looking through Albuquerque Indian Health Board to look at epidemiology, to go in and take a look at the health aspects of our elders and people that have lived there the longer time period that they've had. So we're trying to reach out to put it out publicly that we want more support, want to have tribe leaders come do some walks and go against what Energy Fuels is doing. They're a company outside of the United States, but they're here to make money. So just wanted to put that out, and thank you for the question. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. And I put the link to the story in the chat. And yeah, Danielle Mondragon's ready to spearhead a protest here in Denver. So yeah, I mean, more attention. Anyone who has a relationship with your legislators, or even if you don't, send them a letter. Let them know that this is a matter that is a concern to you. So I will circle back to Rick and ask, how does colonization impact your tribes and communities today? And what are some ways that allies can support Indigenous people in Colorado? You're on mute.
That's a very painful question, because I'm sitting here looking at my relatives on the Cheyenne side and how our close relationship with the Arapahos and the absence of the Lakota people who were part of this land, and our we've had good relationships with the Utes over the years. And, but you look at the Front Range of Colorado, you look at that, most beautiful place, some of the most beautiful places and sacred places in the United States. That's our homeland, and our people aren't here. We've been exiled in the land of the free. People can't talk about, civilization. They can't talk about, respect, because until our people are able to come back in a good way and find a way to renew their connections to our sacred Mother Earth's land here, it'll be a scar on the face of every president in the future if they don't do something about this immediately, because this is our homeland. The Creator gave us this land. God is watching every day to see what people are going to do. Our allies have been stepping up in Boulder and different places around the country. You see them stepping up and starting to raise these issues. Call to question, how come this happened? And what are you going to do about it? We have a group up in South Dakota, the Indian Collective, that is motivated to talk about land back and how do we get our land back? How can we come back into our spaces? And there are potentials. There's no reason why the federal government can't say, oh, we want the Cheyennes and Arapahos to come back, and we'll let you co-manage the national grasslands at the Arkansas National Grasslands. 250,000 acres are the Pawnee grasslands. Come help us manage those and bring your people with you and bring buffalo back. Those are the kinds of things that can happen. But one of the things I think I have to be real careful with, and I want everybody to know this, is when Indian people are talking about land back, they're not talking about your land. They're not talking about your home, your homestead, your ranch, your farm. We're talking about federal land. We're talking about state land. We're talking about land that could come back to us, because we never want to put anybody through what our people went through, and having them have to move off of and move away from their homeland and never come home. We just want to come home.
I'm unmuted. Thank you for that quotable quote about we've been exiled in the land of the free. I think one thing that I heard that was really impactful for me from Representative Benavidez, she was discussing how changes were made about Columbus Day. And she said that the Allies provided an important role in bird dogging at town halls. And that showed that these issues do not just matter to Native Americans, they matter to everybody. So, the more voices we can get and help us amplify our own voices, the better. So I will ask the same question to Fred. How does colonization impact your tribes and communities today? And what are some ways allies can support Indigenous people in Colorado?
Well, start with colonization, tried to wipe us out. And it moved us out of the most beautiful, like Rick said, the most beautiful, most sacred land that took care of us. And it moved us out of there and put us, Oklahoma was a dumping ground for Indians. And that's why it was called Indian territory. It dumped so many Indians here. Their tribes they have no business here. Even, they say that the Nez Perce was here at one time until they finally talked their way into a reservation. Well, we didn't have that option. We were moved here. That's what colonization did to us. It moved us here. Not only that, at one point in time during our history, it put a bounty on our heads. Everybody that was Cheyenne, Arapaho, no matter what tribe they were in Colorado, they were fair game at one time. This is colonization. And so, again, how does it affect us today? Well, we're here. We're doing the best we can in Oklahoma. We're making bounds. leaps and bounds by taking care of each other here. And we're becoming stronger through the use of lawyers, again, of educated people that's able to go back and begin to talk with the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is opening the doors now. You know, they want to know our history. Yes, we want to tell them our history. Yes, we want to show them. You know, we want to be there. We want to be able to go back to certain places to pray and to worship. We want to be able to go back and get medicines. We want to go back and be able to get the things that we need in our ceremonies that are there in Colorado. People don't realize that we do this. And as far as history, yes, we want to tell the school children who we are, where we're at, why we're here, and that we're still alive. You know, I had an interview this morning with a 10-year-old who wanted to know about Little Raven. And so I was on a Zoom meeting this morning with a 10-year-old, and I was telling him all the good things about Little Raven. But the man suffered drastically through his life. I didn't tell him that. And that's something that needs to be said. That's what colonization did to us. Thank you.
I think that's so important. Something we can all do as parents is holding our educators accountable. So Chester, do you have any recommendations for how allies can support Indigenous people in Colorado, especially when we're talking about how colonization is impacting your tribes and community today? Chester, we can circle back to him. Oh, there we go. Looks like
This word colonization, you know,
Mhm.
and the history. This history that we learned through the years, it was just one-sided. That was the white man's version of history. That wasn't our history. That was their history. Our history wasn't wrote in books. It's oral history. It's still carried on today. The way our people lived and survived. And then this Dawes Act came into play. They started taking our children away. They're going to educate them. They're going to try to turn them into white people. That's impossible. My grandparents used to get their mouths washed out because they spoke their language in the boarding schools. Got beat because they wanted to colonize our Indians to be like them. We didn't want to be like them. We still don't want to be like them. That's why we got an education now to combat that syndrome, you might say. We want to turn that colonization around to decolonization for our people. We want our people to know that we were given a way of life to follow. Once our language is gone, our culture is gone, we're just like everybody else. We're just the people. We're not Cheyenne, Arapaho, Lakota, Ute, whatever, you know. We'll just be people. Just like the rest of the world. And you know, that's a real hard pill to swallow, you know, that colonization, because it took away a lot of our way of life. It was beat out of them, you know, beat out of some of our relatives. Like when the Dawes Act came into play, our people, our children, 2,000 children got shipped to Carlisle Indian School. today, they list 17 of our people down there. What happened to the rest? What happened to the rest of our people? Did they run away? One story I heard was the rich people from New York came down there and took some of our kids and took them to New York for, you might call it child slavery now, you know. So, you know, it's really sad how we were treated, but we persevered. We're still here. And we're gonna bring our folks back home. Those children that were down there in Carlisle. We're doing genealogy to get them back. We're gonna identify the family they came from today. We're about halfway there now. So we're gonna bring them back home and we're gonna teach our children our way of life. Because we're the last line of defense today. We had a meeting today with the elders. And it was very touching. Some of the stories they had, the language and everything like that. 85, 88-year-old people, you know, talking to us about education and our way of life, things that they went through. It was eye-opening. But, you know, that colonization really made our people go in a different direction. Some of them bought the product, and some didn't. And I don't like the product myself. I would rather speak my language and do the things that we used to do, but you can't do that today. You go out there and roam around, you get on somebody's land, they're gonna shoot you. You know, there's people out there that still carry that hate for us. Really do. We had a ranch out there where I come from, Hammond, Oklahoma. It was called the Cheyenne and Arapaho Ranch. And when this statehood thing came about, we lost that land. And I know the family that has that property now, and I always threw it in their face. That land you're on, that belongs to us. That guy tried to run over me with a truck. When I told him that, I said, "It must be true. You're trying to hurt me." But, you know, I'm a proud Cheyenne, and I won't lay down for him. And I appreciate this meeting. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for bringing up all of those points of, you know, the hard work that it takes to reclaim our culture and our traditions. We are going to transition to the Q&A section of our program for the remaining time. The one that stuck out to me was sent to me via direct message. And any of our speakers, if you'd like to speak on these questions, that would be great. But the first one I would like to touch upon is about the role of women in the tribes you all represent, and how are things different traditionally versus, you know, some of the things that are going on today that are impacting our women, such as the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives crisis. Would anyone like to speak on that? Rick?
Yes, I would, because I was raised by my grandmother and my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was born in 1869 and my grandmother was born in 1899. And I grew up in an environment where women basically would decide things. They would say, you have a naming ceremony, and they're going to decide what the name is going to be, and they're going to decide, you know, what the process is, and then they would always take the men and they'd put them out front and they would tell them what to say. And that's always been the way our people was. The women really were the ones who were driving this. You would never ever come back from council and say, we decided in council that we're going to move the camp tomorrow. That wouldn't work, because it was the women who owned the homes. It was the women who moved those camps. And I still see that today. Here in Colorado, we have a powerful group of women who are fighting for the rights of all of us, hunting and fishing and everything we do. Our women are leading the way. And I think, we have a real important bill before the state legislature regarding murdered and missing Indigenous women. And we understand that our own Indian Commission said they opposed the bill. And we understand that the governor is going to oppose the bill and may even veto it. And this is absolutely horrific. Our women are sacred. Our women have brought us into this world, and we exist. We exist for them and with them, and I think that's never changed. And it's unfortunate that throughout history, all these anthropologists and archaeologists, whoever, they would come to our people and they would say, well, we want to learn about you. We want to learn everything we can about you. And they would only talk to the men. And so, I'm one of those men that kind of, I'll talk to them, and I've been known to exaggerate a little bit about, how great we were and everything, but that isn't the truth about it. So that's my opinion about it.
Thank you. I also got a direct question about whether this will be recorded, and yes, it is being recorded, and we can ask Kate more at the end about logistics on obtaining this recording. I think she got disconnected though, so but hopefully, I do know this is being recorded, and we will find out more about where that recording will be available. Oh, she's back. I also got another question. The Colorado Territory was formed in 1861. Was there a relationship between the forming of the territory and the assault on the people? And I do see that Fred answered that somewhat in the chat. Do you want to say any more about that, Fred?
Sure. Again, like I was saying, we were here, and the United States government came, and they were going to build railroads, and they were going to build forts, and they were going to do all this, but we were living here. And so they started out with the 1851 treaty, and that gave us basically the land that we lived in. So 1851 treaty didn't hurt us that bad. What it did, though, was to put us in an area, and you might say the settlers wanted the area we was in. So that's where I said the assault started in 1851, because at that time it put us in a boundary. It put us in a specific place on this planet. Although we didn't, we could leave this area, but we're not supposed to, and they were not supposed to come in. Instead, they did. They flooded the area, and that made them realize that we got to do something else. So what do? They continued to reduce the area that we were in by treaty completely until we was completely out of Colorado. So that assault started with the treaties.
Thank you. I also want to uplift a comment from Monica Snowbird. She says, we may not want to take your backyard back, but you can leave your property land to Native organizations or foundations in your will. So that was a comment during the section where we're asking how allies can support us. And Rick had the comments about land back. So I wanted to uplift that comment because I like that a lot. Let's see. And Kate says they'll be sending the recording out in the mailing. Okay, I'm just going to back up. I saw a couple of good questions, one from Andres and one from Lorraine. Andres asks, with respect, what is the opinion on the future of the Native nations and the relationship between the effects of genocide and the quantum blood doctrine? Did any of our speakers or Chairman Hart have any thoughts about that? Chester, do you have any thoughts about blood quantum?
Yes, I do. You know, we're the only nationality in these United States that have to prove a pedigree. You know, we're not an animal. We're a human being. And we have to prove that we're Native American by a little card that says how much blood you have of that nation. And it's very sad that we have to, that we're a pedigree. We're like an animal in the eyes of the government. And, you know, we're the wards of the government too. You know, if you want to look at it, you know, that's, we can't handle business on our own. We have to go to the Bureau to get an okay to do something. You know, and that's not right. You know what? When the Cobell case came out, who was it against? You know, that was against the government. That was controlled by our own people. And it caused a lot of people to lose a lot of money. What this colonization is all about, money. Because today you can't do anything without money in the non-native eyes. But in the native eyes, you don't have to have money to do what you want to do. Unless you're going to drive someplace, then you're going to have gas money. But this blood quantum, I think, myself, it should be taken out. And if you're raised by a nation, a Native American nation, that's who you belong to. You know, that's the way I think. They always told me, you got one drop of Cheyenne blood in you, you're a Cheyenne. You have a right to our traditional ways, our way of life, our language, our culture. One drop. That doesn't amount to this pedigree that we have listed today. So I'm all against this pedigree stuff, you know, this blood quantum. It doesn't. There's people that take advantage of that, you know. They half non-native, they can jump back and forth on the fence. Whenever it's good for the native, then they're all native. When they're slamming the native, then they're not native. They don't have the heart. If they have the heart, you know, it's good. They'll be 100%, whether they're half or not. or if they have a quarter or an eighth. If they have the heart, then they're native. And I don't like that quantum thing, because it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's a modern form of erasure for sure.
Right,
Because it's not sustainable.
right.
It's hard to find someone from your own tribe to keep that blood quantum sufficient. Lorraine asks, is there a program to tell true Colorado history to children in all the Colorado public schools? And I will say that there was legislation passed a few years ago about including Native American education in civics classes throughout Colorado. However, it was bundled with a lot of other groups. It was, to also teach history about Latinx communities and, all of the other, quote unquote, minority groups were all put in together. So there wasn't specific attention on Native American education. And it was also talking about us in a historical sense, which, as you hear from our conversation today, understanding history is so vitally important. But we also need to have an understanding of the modern contributions of Native people to society. We have made advancements in science, math, every single subject that children learn about. Native Americans have contributed to those fields. So in my opinion, that bill only went halfway. Do any of our other speakers have things to say about that? Chairman Hart?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wolf. I wanted to back up to the last question too. Chester talked a little bit about how we have to jump through hoops. The tribes across this country, all 574 of them that are federally recognized, are the most regulated of any ethnic group in this country for anything. To me, I feel that the federal government has failed in their fiduciary responsibility to be our stewards, to take care of us. So we in turn have to go through a process of looking out for ourselves. And enrollment being one of them is something that we have a challenge about right now. There's different types of enrollment. You can do it by blood quantum, you can do it on descendancy, on the maternal side. I mean, there's just a lot of different ways that they do. But the inherent right that we have as Native people is diminishing because of all the restrictions and guidelines that are being brought out in legislation sometimes. So just wanted to make that statement on that part. On educating in Colorado, I don't think it should be an elective. It should be mandatory to understand in the curriculum in a public school setting, because we ran into this with the mascot legislation for schools, public schools, and naming and how derogatory some of the names are. The only way we can really look at that is to educate people in general. And to do that is we have to put in a curriculum mandatory on what the history is of Native tribes within the state of Colorado. This state could take the lead in doing that, and maybe some other states already have, but we need to put it in as something mandatory to meet the needs of educating people. Today, I still have some schools fighting to keep some of their names, and we can't. It's just not possible in a way because it's derogatory. So the only way to do that is to educate them. Why? Explain to them, and hopefully that they understand their heart and their mind that these things, these words, these things they do at halftime with the headdress and hooping, hollering around, or the tomahawk, it's something offensive to tribes, and we really need to be able to do that. On the issue I think earlier was brought up about missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, and some of the sponsors that sponsored that bill sometimes might not understand the jurisdictions of it too. As I mentioned earlier, we as tribes are very regulated in a way and more challenging in getting any type of support. Why is this lady that was killed up in Wyoming had all this support from different agencies, but when it comes to a Native woman or somebody missing and murdered relative, we don't get that support from outside agencies. So you have your state, federal, tribal, all these regulatories are not working together through an MOU or MOA to help each other out. They tend to say, well, that's not our problem. That's tribes under the federal government. Let them take care of it. Just like with heinous crimes that happen on the reservation. If it was a white person that came in and did it, we have to give that jurisdiction to somebody else because we don't have the authority over non-Indians. There's just so many regulatory issues that we need to look at and how to weave them in, and understanding that sometimes it's harder for us and more challenging. And that's what we're facing today with this murder and missing Indigenous relatives, women, children, all of them. That there has to be language in there. Who takes the role on certain things? Who takes care of this? Who initiates the first steps and follows through? And the federal government has really failed a lot of times in these areas, and sometimes the state too. So just my comments, Ms. Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hart. I do want to uplift a couple of comments in the chat. One from Jim R., who shared the Ute Nation resource guide from CCIA for elementary schools. There's a link in the chat. And then also Liz Cook mentioned another resource. Let's try to pronounce this, New Q. Strong resources, great. And a lot of folks are working hard to get it out in schools and have more schools use it. So I imagined you can Google that if you want to find it. I am going to take one more question, and whoever from our panel wants to answer this, that would be great. And then we will finish up with some house cleaning notes from Kate. Daniel asks, I had my Native ancestry erased by my European Spanish side in what is now Southern Colorado. Because of this, I hesitate to claim to be Native. How do we grow our quote unquote Native heart and identify our identity? Any of our panelists have some thoughts about that when you're wanting to reclaim your Native side and know more about it? What are some ways to do that in a respectful way? Rick, can you answer that?
You know, it's very interesting because that's part of colonization. You know, when people were intermixing with Spanish people in Mexico, those people were part Indian, they were part Native, and the same thing happened in the United States, and specifically in the Southwest at that time, a period when the proclamation allowed Colorado citizens to kill Indians. That had a significant impact on a group of Apaches who lived in the Southwest part of the United States. In fact, most of those bands that were impacted by that are extinct. The survivors are there, still living in the area, and every once in a while I'll hear stories from people that I know down there. So, well, my grandmother was Apache, or my great grandmother was Apache, and that's true, because what happened is at the very same time they were killing Indians in Colorado, there was a wave of Mexican people who came into Colorado and inhabited those areas. And they took those Indian people under their wings and they hid them out to keep them alive. So we have many stories today from people in that area that, you know, that's true, that, you know, that, and, you know, the other part of it is, you know, the colonization of the mind. You know, every Mexican American or Mexican person in the Americas has some indigenous blood, and yet they will try to disguise it, because of it. I don't know how many people, when I first came to Colorado, they'd say, oh, I'm not Mexican, I'm Spanish, and that was a way of trying to hide, hide that shame of being Indian or hide that shame of being Mexican. And that's just the way the system works. And if you weren't white, you were discriminated against, and you sometimes you have to try to protect yourselves by doing that. We had Indian people that did the same thing. I know people who I grew up around that, they would completely deny that they were Indians. And, part of it was, they couldn't get jobs if they were Indians. Part of it, the racism in America was so bad, when I was growing up, that, people would deny their heritage. And I think that's kind of the ultimate of racism, is when you can force a group of people to deny their existence. That's probably the most sordid, iniquitous form of genocide and racism. I don't know if I answered the question or not, but
No, you did. It's that process of learning to love yourself and learning to love, as I think it was Chester that said, even that one drop. And so I really want to thank all of our panelists today, especially Chairman Hart for jumping in last second and joining us and in sharing his insights. So valuable. And as Lisa Tran phrased it, shifting mindsets. That's what we're doing today. We're creating new allies. We're arming our current allies with information so that you can help us be part of this movement, because we really need you. So we appreciate everyone for joining us, everyone who presented. I am going to transition over to Katie for some housekeeping notes, and then we will be done for the evening. Chimagwech. Oh, Rick has one thing to say. Oh, except he's muted. And then if you could pass it to Katie, that'd be great.
I don't know how to do that, but
just say, Katie, it's yours.
Can we have each one of the participants just say a few closing words?
Sure.
What they want to say about this whole thing, and can I start?
Yes.
The greatest injustice that has gone unresolved for Cheyenne and Arapaho people was done by the legal system. The courts refused to hear the case of the descendants of Wounded Knees seeking reparations for the murder of women and children at Sand Creek. The courts refused to hear it for the simple reason is that they said you failed to get sovereign immunity. And that is so obscene when you think about the justice system. It's like an eagle that can't fly. We have the trust system on this side. The trust system says the government is supposed to take care of you and protect you. And on the other wing of this American eagle that can't fly is the justice system. And they're saying, you don't have any rights. You don't have any, there's so many legal kinds of things, latches, estoppels, plenary power that have been specifically developed to keep Indian people from being able to take their rightful place in America. And that's got to stop.
Thank you for those closing remarks. Fred, do you have any closing things to say tonight?
I would just encourage all people that if you have, like Chester said, one drop of blood, go to somebody and talk to them and ask them for help. Ask them to show you what it is like for the life that you live. Ask them to help you to become more complete on your side, your indigenous side, your Indian side. Ask them that. And the majority of the time, because you ask, we are required to help you.
Mhm.
Doesn't cost money, it doesn't cost anything, but in the long run, it's going to show you the life that you're afraid to claim. It's going to show you how rich, how powerful it is that one single drop of blood is. So don't ever give up. You know, I hear it all the time. How can I find it? How can I'll just give up. Don't ever give up. Find out where you're from. Find out where your heart is, and then go and become one with it. Thank you.
That's beautiful, Fred. Chester, do you have any closing thoughts tonight?
No, I just appreciate everybody that showed up tonight. You know, it's something we have to do, is to educate the legislative body of Colorado. If they don't know, we need to teach them. You know, we need to reestablish ourselves in Colorado. We need to kick that door open if it's not open. You know, that was our homeland. You know, we didn't have boundaries. And you know, who does, I'll put it this way, who does the federal government think they are, you know, to give our land back to us in these treaties? Well, you can live here. We were already living here. You know, this is our home, no matter where it's at. Then they put boundaries around it. Well, you can only go around here. You can't go over here. You can't go over there. We were nomadic. We followed the game. But then they want to give us our land back, or they want to give us our land that we can use when it was already ours to begin with. So how do you do that? Because I'm gonna try it on one of these ranchers over here. Hey, no, I'm just saying that.
Well, thank you, Chester. Chairman Hart, do you have any final words you'd like to share?
Yes, thank you. In Ute, I would say "Dewitchtaway" means thank you very much for being a part of this discussion. I see that there's a lot of people listening, and people that are listening, hoping that you take away that we should be proud nations, and we are. And we should be proud of where we're heading into the future. These gentlemen that spoke today, they don't have to be elected officials as I am, but they're leaders in your communities, for your tribes, to take us to that next level. We have children and grandchildren that are not here yet. We have to make it to where they have a good life in the future and have all the opportunities that they can. But let's not forget where we come from as the different tribes that are across this country. There's some that are not even on the federal register. Some have to go through a state recognition. As Rick mentioned, some people said, well, I don't want to be Native American, I'm Hispanic. And same way the other way, where Hispanic said, I'm tribal. But we learn through our Creator that we have many, many, many blessings that we have each day. Today we have our life. Today we have a body that moves around. We see, we hear, we taste, we feel. All the things that are part of us. That mind that our Creator gave us, give that choice to be who we are. So these lands that we travel across, the different animals that we pray for, like our winged animals, the four-legged, the ones in the water, everything that grows to the dirt. That these two are also blessings to each one of us, as it's all of God's creation. And we need to think of it in a good, positive manner, but keep working together. Yes, there'll be times that we might disagree with whoever, but we come to a resolution where we're going to move on in the betterment of our children, our grandchildren that are not here yet. So I thank each and every one of you for your thoughts, your minds, and what you're thinking, speaking from your heart and your mind in that way, that we look out for where we're going, but not forget where we came from. So that moccasin we wear on one shoe, our children do, and the other shoe, today's shoe, that they remember how they walk in life, in the path of life, that we not forget all of the stuff we talked about today. So with that, thank you all very much. The witch way. Thank you.
Good night, and thank you all again, all of our panelists. I see that Kate has put some links in our chat for donating. And she also wants me to remind you all to, when you sign up for these, please check the box that you want to be on our mailing list, because that's how we can let you know about future things and future asks and all of that. But she also has asked about emails in support of Mount Blue Sky. Can you talk about that and close this out, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did share a link in the chat for to join our mailing list. And so feel free to sign up there. And then regarding Mount Blue Sky, so I've been working pretty closely with quite a few folks on this call. Fred, Chester, and Rick have been sort of leading the effort to rename Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky. And the Clear Creek County Commission voted in March to rename Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky. And now that the state of Colorado will have its turn in making a decision on this effort. And so we are encouraging everyone to write the governor of Colorado, as well as the CGNAB, or their acronym always gets messed up in my head, the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board, and let them know that you support Mount Blue Sky, and that you also support renaming Evans. As we've heard from this history tonight, it's clear that his name does not belong on a mountain here in Colorado. And there are many other cases of renaming. The Ute tribes are working to rename the Gore Range to the Nuchu Range. And most recently, S Mountain was renamed to Mestaa'ehehe Mountain. And so if you join our mailing list, you'll get updated on renaming efforts. And if you want to get involved, there's a link that Justine just posted, and there's email addresses for decision makers and who to email. I don't know, Fred, if you want to jump in and say anything about Mount Evans, but feel free to jump in if you have a couple words for people in regards to renaming.
Yes. If you all look west, I heard it said in Colorado, we find direction by looking west at the mountains. So you always know which way west is. But when you look west out of Denver, you see that mountain. The mountain over there with a name that just basically speaks betrayal to our people. This man, from the moment that he started the Camp Weld Accords or the Council, he had our destruction in his mind. And he betrayed us by telling us one thing and doing another on the other hand. Let's get rid of that name, that feeling. Let's go with a pretty name. Let's go with a name that we can all feel good about. Mount Blue Sky. It represents the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes. But I'm sure all tribes can somehow connect to that name. And then we ask that it be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I also want to put an ask out there that if you have a business or a nonprofit, particularly within the Indigenous community and you want to show your support for Mount Blue Sky, we are taking letters from individual organizations and businesses to submit to the state and the federal board. And so I just put the Mestaa'ehehe Coalition email in the chat. And so if you have a letter, feel free to send that our way, or if you want examples of what other folks have turned in, let us know. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Hope you'll join our mailing list and keep in touch. And yeah, onward. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Good night. I just had a last minute question about just confirmation of the speakers' names. Tonight we had Rick Williams from People of the Sacred Land, Fred Mosqueda from Arapaho Language and Culture Program with the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, Chester Whiteman from the Cheyenne Language and Culture Program, and then we had Chairman Manuel Hart from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yep, both of them.